we are on to innovation and technology. Ashley.
Great. So assuming everyone's ready, we will start on page 489. A chance to stretch your legs a little bit. So 49 feet org chart. There's nothing crazy there. The only thing that I'll point out is the lower right. The systems analyst bumped up from 3 to 4. That was a program improvement. And assuming Shelly will talk about a little bit in the finance section later this week.
Now, is that on our program improvement list?
Yes.
I see IT support lead finance department. You need help, huh?
We have a lot of systems and
Yeah. Okay.
So other than that, the org chart remains unchanged. 491. So in short, our mission is really to be a partner with the rest of the department and city as a whole. We exist as an internal service to support the police department. So if we are not aligned as a partner, we're not doing our jobs, which really gets into our budget. Our budget is based off of what other needs are out there in the different departments. So we'll talk about that in a little bit, but everything that's in our budget comes from the needs of the department. So into the department overview, just to kind of summarize a little bit. So like the org chart shows, we have 3 divisions within IT. We have our network services group that really is the back office people. You don't see them too much. They keep the lights on, if you will. We have our front office group, which is desktop. They do all of the computers, phones, all of the stuff that you are interacting with every day. And then we have GIS. So those are the 3 divisions. And we also support, just as a reminder, the City of Algona and City of Pacific and their IT needs. So,
Councilmember Troutman.
Who are the 2 GIS?
Jagdeep and Dane.
Who?
Jagdeep, J-A-G, Deep, D-E-E-P, and Dane.
Councilmember Wells.
Do we anticipate any increases from needs from Algona or Pacific?
We handle those in a similar fashion as our own, so we do talk about what they look like over the years, and there's nothing that's a significant change. No. So into the goals, I'll highlight a few of them. One of them is last year we did launch that Auburn Smart app. So the City of Auburn does have a dedicated app that we're pushing any online stuff through. The idea is to continue that app and continue to make it better, more user-friendly, more services, those types of things. In terms of the training, not only for IT staff to just keep up with how quickly technology changes, training the rest of the city. We talked about this last night with some of the know-before stuff on all the cybersecurity things that are happening, all the way down to how to use Word better. So those are things that we're rolling out citywide to include for professional growth and really just to keep up too. And we did launch Socrata a couple years ago. The idea is to continue with that as kind of an open data portal. We have budget stuff in there. We have some of our bigger public records request data in there. So permits, licenses, budget, a lot of that stuff is there. And the idea is to fine tune and expand so we can hopefully minimize some public records requests. Turning the page to 492, just a couple in there. One of the biggest ones that we have done and will continue to do is the fiber expansion. We talked about that last night as well. We will continue to find key areas to expand our fiber, which is also expanding our wireless. And that expansion is to connect city buildings to each other. It's also to get to different disaster recovery sites. So if something ever happens to downtown Auburn, this building is no longer, we are still operational. Those are some of the key strategic areas we're looking to link up with fiber.
Councilmember Pelosi.
Ashley, I think it would be worthwhile in the future to show the council the infrastructure that is required for Wi-Fi within the city limits. Like, what do you hang on a pole in the street? How far will that pole take us just to show us the actual, you know what's going on, but some of us, we're not that briefed. on
Or
that
smart.
technology.
Yeah, I could absolutely do something like that.
Just something crude, not elaborate, just,
I think it will help with an understanding of some of this stuff too, so we could put.
yeah.
Councilmember Troutman.
So do we have a backup? Or, where exactly do we have our hub? Is it here at the annex building? And do we have a backup in case something ever happened?
So yes, we do have main areas. I probably shouldn't in public safety
Oh, no.
or in
Well,
public talk
okay.
about that. We do have
we do.
main areas.
Okay.
And we do have disaster recovery sites. So basically backup and recovery.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember DeCoursey.
Actually, back on 491, you talked about Socrata. And you have a term here in quotations, will be stories.
Correct.
Unless you're familiar with things like clouds and such, can you explain stories?
So stories are basically taking all of this data that is really hard to look at sometimes and putting it in a presentation format that people can actually follow. So they're called stories. So it could be, you're used to looking at a presentation, for example. So it can kind of walk you through how to understand the data or telling a story with the data. So it's just a visual way of representing the data.
Councilmember Pelosi.
Along those same lines, when IT does reports that are sent out to council, as an example, the one that Dana puts out weekly, some of your language is so far out that I don't understand what you mean. So when you use some of these descriptions like stories, explain what you mean.
Sure. Okay, will do.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, we talked about the fiber, and then just lastly, another one on there, just to kind of summarize again, is the partnerships. So, like I mentioned earlier, partnerships with the departments, partnerships with vendors, partnerships with other cities, regional groups, finding and continuing partnerships, because at the end of the day, it's a huge cost savings, it's a huge resource savings, and many things to form these partnerships, because a lot of what we do doesn't just stop right at the boundaries. Moving on to page 493. So those three charts kind of represent one for each one of our divisions I mentioned. The first one is essentially our customer service levels. So we strive to make sure that anytime someone submits a request to us, whether that's a request or a problem or my computer's not working, whatever it is, to have a response at a minimum within 30 minutes, and hopefully it's fixed within that day. There's going to be some things that are bigger that just aren't going to be done in a day, but we try to respond within 30 minutes and at least get back to the customer with, hey, this is the situation. The one below is actual clicks on our EGIS websites. So I'm sure you're familiar with some of those. We've demoed those in the past, but all of our interactive GIS sites, we're upwards in the right now at around the 8 million clicks a year range. We're hoping that gets more, and really what that boils down is people are utilizing the tools and the data in their everyday job. And then lastly, the network. So that is probably the most familiar one. We want to keep everything up and running all the time. So we have a goal of 100% uptime. Realistically, that's somewhere in the 99 point something range, because stuff does happen. But back to our recovery is when it happens, how quickly can we respond and understand why it happened, fix the problem, and not let it happen again. And really, that's about all. The rest of this is line item details I'd be happy to answer any questions about, but like I said, our line items for the most part remain unchanged. There's a little bit of movement within the lines, but this is after sitting down with the departments and talking about what the next 2 years looks like and making sure that we have the appropriate funds and service levels to meet those needs.
Councilmember Brown.
Yes, on page 494, again, revenue less expenditures. I'm just curious about the negative number 2020, slightly, quite a bit smaller negative number, 2019.
Well, if you look up above, let's see, you're looking at the 458,188. If you look up 1, 2, 3 numbers and you see 500,000,
Yes.
we're going to transfer that out to capital down below, and you'll see the transfer in down below into capital. And what we look at is ending working capital, and it is below that highlighted line. And we have beginning working capital and then ending working capital. And you can see that we have quite a bit of working capital still at the end of 2020 of about $2 million in operations. So the reason that that's showing negative is that we have a nice $500,000 transfer out from one bucket, one fund, or operating bucket, to our capital bucket.
Okay.
So it's not really, it's residual funds that are in there that we can move out.
Okay.
And just to clarify, those two funds are within IT, and that kind of money would go to things like the fiber expansion stuff that we're talking about.
Councilmember Pelosi.
But doesn't that reflect confusion when you've got it bracketed at the very bottom?
Well, it shows that it's just our working capital is decreasing. It's also showing that we have an expenditure in there that's showing it's an operating transfer out. So it's expenditure. It's
but
the actual, well, we can't put a positive, how are we going to get the money out?
So Bill, if you look up about 2 lines, you've got beginning working capital January 1 in 2020 of $300,697 and ending working capital of $300,397. So the negative number that you're looking at, the 458,488 down below, is just the total change.
Between
It's not the ending
bet-
fund balance.
Yeah,
it's just
between the
change.
operating and the capital fund.
Isn't there a better way to express that? When
Well-
someone reads it?
Well, we are reducing our working capital position, so we need to reflect that. The only way is to not do the transfer, and then we don't have the money down in capital. Our working capital position total,
When you look at revenue and expenditures, you have a total at the bottom. And that total at the bottom will not be bracketed.
If it's in the hole.
No,
it may be.
Well, yeah,
It's in the
it
hole.
could be if your revenues were below
Your expenditures.
expenditures.
Yeah.
It just seems to me that reflects a negative to the department budget.
But it's, well, you're taking money out of one fund and putting it in the other fund. But if you look at the ending balances, they're not negative. You're just looking at the changes within that fund. That's where you're seeing the bracketed number. But there is a positive ending fund balance in those accounts.
Yeah, but one has to do the mathematics.
No, it's right there for you, Bill.
But it says total change in working capital,
And that's,
less 458,000.
it is
because that's the
decreasing.
change in working capital that has been created by that transfer out.
And total working capital is decreasing in this fund, because when we sat down and looked at this with the mayor and all the department directors and looked at this fund was above its minimum reserve, or its maximum reserve. And so with that, there's a lot of projects that were planned. And if you look on
Right.
page 505, you can see the things that we're doing. And you can see that 500,000 that we're utilizing in 2020. And again, in 2019, we're using funds. Because we were above our maximum reserve, there were some projects and updates and upgrades and some replacements of of things that we have, and you know the lifespan of these things is so short. So that's one of the reasons you're seeing a decrease in overall fund balance or working capital. And then that revenues less expenditures is just that operating transfer out, which is just this. When we do financial reporting, we combine these two, so we don't have a separate fund, but when we budget them separately.
So Bill, if you're looking on page 494, you'll notice that the top portion is the operating fund. And then about halfway down the page is the capital fund. So those, they happen to both be on the same page because they both fit, but you're transferring out of one into the other.
This seems that it could be portrayed at the bottom.
Jack.
Now, if we're using working capital, there's no other way to portray it.
Scarf here.
So the 458,000 is what's been utilized for capital.
Yes, as pointed out on page 505.
Yeah.
And you see that there's a decrease also in 2019, and those are our capital projects on that 505. And again, the ending working capital between the two funds on December 31st, 2020 is about $2,300,000, which is within their policy. It's about at their max policy.
And this isn't the only place you're going to see it. Within cemetery, on page 473, it's the same thing.
Right, same
You have the operating fund and the capital fund, and you're transferring between those two funds.
You're going to see it in water, sewer, storm, equipment rental.
The airport.
Yeah, that's when we set up the two funds. When we financial report, when we do our financial reporting at the end of the year, we combine these operating and capital funds, so you don't see this. But we budget it differently, and it gives us better control, and I think a better understanding, I hope, of where our money's going and how we're utilizing it.
Okay. Thank you for the discussion on that.
Councilmember Trout Manuel.
Bill, thank you for bringing that up, because it did clear up a lot of, you explaining it the way it is, because at first that's what I saw too. I was kind of a little confused, but after I looked at it then, and you talking about it now, it just, made everything very much clearer. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Ashley? Councilmember Wales.
Ashley, I'd like you to look at page 499. Travel associated with training and conferences with 18 employees and $12,000, that's $666 per person. Is that enough money?
Yes, it is.
And is that just for like air travel and for cars or whatever?
Everything on the travel side. So it'll be hotel, cars, flights, those types of things.
Okay, and then if you,
Well, and look at page 500.
there's the rest of it.
Yeah, there's
30,000.
staff training, important.
So that is two separate.
And so that would be their tuition or their registration and whatever?
Correct.
Okay. How is those requests processed? Who approves the training, and how is that? They fill out a travel voucher and then someone approves it?
So internally, what we do is we sit down and we look at this every year, and we look at all 17, now 18 employees, and we look about what's their wish list for training, and we compare that to what's the needs of the department in the
Yeah.
city. And sometimes there's gaps, sometimes there's not. And we go through and say, okay, here are the things that we believe is going to be the best benefit for the city.
Yeah.
And we sit down, we do that as a leadership team.
Yeah.
And then we go and we look and say, okay, these are the ones we're going to do.
Uh-huh.
If there's anything that's out of state travel, so that goes to Shelley and goes from there in terms of getting approval to do those things. But all the local, there's a lot of free ones too.
Yeah.
But the local ones and stuff like that, it just gets measured against the needs of the city.
Okay, but they're all approved by Shelley or the mayor?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, another question on page 500. Staff recognition.
Where are you looking?
Miscellaneous.
Miscellaneous.
Number
2019.
3.
Number 5, under miscellaneous, $5,000. What do you do for staff recognition?
It could be like for example, we have a new employee starting on Thursday, and maybe we do like a welcome breakfast or something like
Okay.
that.
Okay. That's good for morale and it.
Correct.
Okay. And number 6 there, we have a city clerk LIMS replacement.
Oh, in this year, in 2018.
Yes.
So LIMS is what we use, that's the abbreviation for our Novus, the software that we use for managing the minutes and agendas for our council meetings.
Oh,
So what
Okay.
we looked at is a replacement of that software,
okay.
which would allow for more user-friendly tools, maybe some voting up here, some different things
Okay,
like that.
great. Okay, great. Thank you. Now, that's this year, so that wouldn't be a program improvement.
Correct.
Great. Thank you.
Councilmember Pelosi.
Looking over at,
Need a
go
magnet?
ahead, I'll find it.
Okay.
Councilmember.
On the
Oh,
same,
I'm sorry, Councilmember DeCoursey had his hand up before.
go ahead.
Ashley, are there required trainings and required upgrades for certifications that are mandated?
There are some, but there's not a lot of required ones.
So just if somebody has to go through a certification upgrade, is that something that's periodic, or how often does that take place?
So again, it's going to depend on the position, and it's also going to depend on what we're doing as a city. So there are things like our engineers, for example, that have to go through certain training to even hold that title and do the things that they do. So every position's going to be a little bit different. So I don't know if there's a specific one that you're looking at, but
No, just in
what we
general,
like to do is
so.
professional growth plans.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
we say, okay, hey, what do we need this year compared to what do we need in 5 years? And we line those things up, and like I said, that's where we look at gaps and overlaps and things like that.
Councilmember Trotman.
Okay, on the same page on 500, citywide password management, is that for each one of us? You guys take care of all of our passwords?
So
What is
essentially what that would be is every staff member would have access to a tool that manages all your own passwords. So rather than you storing those on sticky notes or Excel spreadsheets or forgetting them, there would be a tool that actually manages your passwords.
And so that costs us that amount of money?
Correct.
Okay. Then also the down below, may I ask one more question? Down below, there's this ER and R fleet.
Yep.
What is that?
That's what Randy was talking about. That's our IT portion of the vehicles that we use. That go back into what Randy was talking about on replacement cycles.
Oh,
So that's our, the maintenance and all of that kind of stuff. We'll pay every year, and once it reaches a certain lifespan, then it pays for
and
replacement.
how many vehicles do you own?
IT has 2 vehicles.
2, okay. All right, thank you.
Councilmember Pelosi.
Yeah. Under miscellaneous, item 2, city memberships. I don't see a detailed breakout on the following pages anywhere.
So we didn't necessarily break out all of the different memberships. Sometimes they change.
It would be interesting to know what memberships you guys
Each
are
department has
members
memberships.
of.
Okay, I can provide that to the council.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else for Ashley? Okay, thank you, Ashley.
Thank you. Good report.
I believe that brings us to the end of today's session.